talk about the Korean War, 1950 to 1954, and the aftermath beyond those dates. At the end of the World War II, the Korean Peninsula was divided roughly in the middle. The northern part was to be communist because of Russian influence in the conflict, and the southern half was to be democratic. Korea had, for a long time, been controlled by the Japanese, but now that they were gone, this was the plan. As a consequence, the United States and its allies had a number of troops on the Korean Peninsula, in the south half of the Korean Peninsula, and Russian advisors were in the north. Suddenly, in early 1950, the North Koreans invaded South Korea in such numbers that the United States and its allies had a hard time just slowing their advance, much less stopping it. They retreated down to the southeastern tip of the peninsula. There's a seaport town there named Pusan, and the area around it, which the Allies continued to hold, was called the Pusan Perimeter. General MacArthur, who was the Governor General of Japan during their Reconstruction, was ordered to take charge of what was going on in Korea and immediately started sending in reinforcements, but the harbor at Pusan could only handle so much, and the North Korean communists were applying a lot of pressure on the defenders of the Pusan perimeter. A lot of small engagements at the squad. MacArthur, being the brilliant strategist that he was, decided there needed to be a second front, if you will, or a way to outflank the North Koreans and cut off their supplies. He chose a port town on the opposite side of the peninsula, halfway up near Seoul, called Incheon. Incheon was thought by the North Koreans to be safe because the tides were so high, and at low tide they were so low that landing craft and other vessels couldn't get close to the shore. So they couldn't unload troops and supplies at low tide. But MacArthur decided this was the best plan and had a very narrow window to pull it off. But he sent the Marines ashore on schedule. They secured an island up in front of Incheon called Wobido Island. They cleared it fairly quickly and then pressed on into Incheon. This, of course, gave quite a bit of consternation to the North Koreans, who immediately abandoned the Pusan perimeter and started moving north. And as they did, the Air Force and Navy pilots strafed and bombed their retreating lines, cut off their supplies, and basically made life difficult for North Koreans. MacArthur, of course, wasn't content with just pushing North Koreans back of the border. He followed them, chased them, if you will, on the western side, chased them all the way up to the Yalu River, which is the border with China, with the army, and landed at another port up the eastern side and pushed to the Chosin Reservoir near the center of the country. But by this time it was Thanksgiving, and Korea has some of the worst weather of the year, the worst weather in the world. It is extremely hot and dry and dusty in the summertime, and it's extremely cold, snowy, and icy in the wintertime. And as the GIs and Marines sat down to eat Thanksgiving dinner, snow was falling, it was freezing cold, and that's the time the Chinese chose to attack and come to the rescue of the North Korean communists. MacArthur had told Truman that it was unlikely the Chinese would come in on the side of the North Koreans, and proposed that if they did, they should use tactical nuclear weapons. Of course, Truman, who had ordered the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was absolutely against the use of nuclear weapons. They also had a disagreement on the general conduct of the war, but MacArthur was extremely popular in the United States, and some had even bandied his name about it being a presidential candidate against Truman in 1952. Now that the Chinese had attacked, it caused quite a bit of difficulty for the United States. They had to retreat back the way they had come, back to Seoul, back down to the eastern coast, and embark on transports to take them off with away from the Chosin Reservoir. They suffered horrendous casualties on both sides. The Chinese probably worse than the Americans, because the Chinese lacked heavy weapons, artillery and Air Force, and the United States could fight a defensive action, and the Chinese had to be out and exposed, so they cut down in large numbers. But the Chinese attack, while stopped just south of Seoul, caused MacArthur to get fired by Truman. The lines were stabilized. They retook Seoul. Seoul went back and forth between the North Koreans and the Allies several times. Finally, the Allies pushed northward, establishing a line of defense about the same position as where they had started in 1950, and there fought to a stalemate. The North Koreans, South Koreans, and the United States agreed to a ceasefire, which still exists to this day. Technically, there still is a state of war between North and South Korea, and technically a state of war between North Korea and the United States. This border is still hotly contested. There are people shot across the border at times. The Chinese have since departed, but the North Koreans are a very, very rigid communist society, and as long as that exists, this state of war is going to exist between the North and the South.